we know that the economy tends to be a weak spot for Democrats. So this is something she really needs to drill into, because she's going to be pressed by former President Trump, who has put forth this pro-business platform. Now, for Trump, it's sort of the opposite in that he needs to work on not falling into the personal attacks that he somehow is always trying to, launch on Harris. A lot of Republicans wish he would stick with the policy and be more disciplined, but it's really unclear that he's going to be able to do that, because we've seen that over the past couple of weeks since Harris has really gained momentum, became the Democratic nominee. He has been rattled by this.
Now, Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump will battle each other next week in their first televised debates, in a high-stakes clash that could give the winner an advantage in the final sprint to Election Day. For Harris, this square-off in Philadelphia on Tuesday is an opportunity to lay out her priorities and show her mettle against a rival who's belittled her intelligence and subjected her to racist and sexist attacks. Trump will get a chance to try and blunt some of Harris's momentum in a race that has tightened considerably since she became the Democratic nominee in July. So, given the last debate signalled the end of President Biden, what can we expect from this one? Julia Manchester is a reporter and host at The Hill in Washington. Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What can we expect from this debate? Because one of the fascinating things that we've seen in the run-up to it is a suggestion from Donald Trump that he doesn't need to prep. He's got so-called policy time instead, I think it's called. But Harris is ensconced in Pittsburgh, trying to get a handle on the debates, the questions ahead of this debate. Do you think they're both taking it as seriously as one another?
Well, first of all, I think the most interesting part going into this debate is that these two people have actually never met each other. In fact, the only other time they've been in the same room with each other was during the State of the Union, when President Trump was president and Kamala Harris was a senator. So that creates an interesting dynamic. But in terms of, how they're prepping, look, for Kamala Harris, this is really about her digging in on those policy stances. She's gotten some criticism for being too vague when it comes to some of her policy stances, particularly on the economy. We know that the economy tends to be a weak spot for Democrats. So this is something she really needs to drill into, because she's going to be pressed by former President Trump, who has put forth this pro-business platform. Now, for Trump, it's sort of the opposite in that he needs to work on not falling into the personal attacks that he somehow is always trying to, launch on Harris. A lot of Republicans wish he would stick with the policy and be more disciplined, but it's really unclear that he's going to be able to do that, because we've seen that over the past couple of weeks since Harris has really gained momentum, became the Democratic nominee. He has been rattled by this.
And can you just give us a sense of, there's this new poll, the Times Siena poll, that shows, Trump 1 point ahead. But are we to put much stool in this suggestion that perhaps Kamala Harris had a great summer, but actually things are looking not particularly fantastic for her now? Or indeed that actually in this poll, 28% said they just needed to know more about her, whereas a far fewer number, about 9%, said they needed to know more about Trump. Are the stakes higher for her in some ways in this debate?
Yes, because you and I think you hit the nail on the head right there. A lot of Americans, even though she is the vice president, they still don't know a ton about her as much as they know about Donald Trump. Remember, even prior to Donald Trump being president, he was this figure who was seen as, this celebrity, this businessman. The American people have been familiar with him for decades, really. Kamala Harris, even though she's been a major figure in politics, particularly in California for decades, nationally, people are still getting to know her. The Trump campaign is still trying to define her, for example. So she has, I think the stakes are higher in that way. But in terms of, where the polls stand, look, she did have a good summer. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a razor tight election, or at least that's what it's proving to be. And I think the Harris campaign, you see Harris do it herself. They are trying to lower expectations. She talks about how she's the underdog, for example. So I think that, at the end of the day, both campaigns realize this is going to be close. There is no clear person who is, ahead at this point. We know that Harris has a lot of momentum, but as we get closer to Election Day, as we see these debates, as we see these candidates on the campaign trail, it's going to get closer.
And just, I think on that point, there's this new abortion ad from Harris, isn't there? Can you tell us a bit about whether or not we're expecting that issue to play in the debate on Tuesday?
Oh, definitely. This is an issue that Democrats have repeatedly hammered Republicans on for the past 2 years, ever since Roe versus Wade, which was the Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion at the federal level since that was overturned, and Democrats have been very successful at that. In 2022, we had the midterm elections, and Republicans were expected to do quite well in that election due to the state of the economy under the Biden-Harris administration. It wasn't, as good as, expected, but we saw Democrats really shift that national conversation to this issue of abortion, and they've been successful with campaigning on that. So this is something they're going to continue to do because Republicans, including Trump himself, they haven't been able to come up with the best response to the abortion attacks.
It'll be fascinating to watch. Julia Manchester, thank you so much for joining us, reporter and host at The Hill in Washington.